Morning everyone. So Jon Burt, I'm the lead enterprise architect at Greater Manchester Combined Authority. We're going to talk about what we're doing with data mesh concepts now. We're looking to use that to join up data across the city region, whilst also adopting and extending where necessary some international data governance standards. So Greater Manchester is a city region, we like to do things differently. We do have a fairly unique conurbation. From a size perspective, you know, a population around 2.9 million, we feel like we're big enough to matter on a national and international stage. But we're also small enough and well connected to know each other as the disparate organisations that work in the city region. And we're really driven to make things happen. And that really comes from the top as well, you know, from the elected Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, together with the portfolio leads from the leader of Manchester City Council, Councillor Bev Craig, and Tom Stannard, Chief Executive Salford. And the portfolio leads are really important to champion what we're doing from a digital perspective alongside the other local authorities that make up the region. And then from a business perspective, Luke Caldwell, who chairs the LEP. And our landscape's really made up of quite a large number of different organisations that we work alongside. So there's the 10 local authorities that make up the city region. But there's also NHS Trust, currently CCGs, but that's changing into the Greater Manchester ICS shortly. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out along kind of locality leads and the formation of that ICS. But we've already got a strong relationship with health through the Health and Social Care Partnership that's been in place for a number of years as part of the devolution agreements that we had. But we also work alongside education and also some of the national organisations. So GCHQ and NCSC are really strong in the area with their local presence in Greater Manchester. Back in February 2020, just before the pandemic, we launched our digital blueprint, and this is a Greater Manchester blueprint for how to deliver digital against a number of priorities with some underlying supporting enablers. And really everything that we look to do kind of falls into these priorities, and some of the key things we're going to touch on today is that empowering people and enabling innovative public services. I also just wanted to touch on where we get our inspiration from for design thinking. So a quote that's been used many times by many different people for different things is to steal ideas from one person is plagiarism, to steal them from many is research. So we don't just focus on one idea, we kind of look to use concepts from different organisations. The first one being GDS, so the organisation, Government Digital Service that's behind the .gov.uk site. Where they've brought together around 400 different central government departments now into a single interface for systems consumed services. And they've really established some guiding principles that we look to utilise ourselves. Another one that I've been following for a number of years is Wardley Mapping. And what this really looks to do is to move services from Genesis and custom built over to a commodity service. So taking things like electric back in the 1800s, that was all different kinds of standards for that, and now you just plug it into the wall as a commodity service. And the reason for that is the more things that we can automate and turn into a commodity allows us to focus on moving up the value chain to those things that have the most influence on our users. So whether that's business intelligence dashboards, low-code apps, data-driven apps that really make an impact back to the organisation, how do we move some of the more hidden services that we operate into more of a commodity? And obviously utilising things like cloud-based services allow us to do that. Another one, and this has been around for quite a while, in particular relevant in public sector, but probably applies to all industries, is Mark Foden's Gubbins of government. I think this goes back to around 2005. If you look at traditional ICT systems where they're monolithic, as in just there to serve a single purpose, when you look to start to join those up, how do you ensure that you're using commonality across those? And the gov.uk website is a great example of that, where there's a single interface back into the system, and behind that is a number of different traditional monolithic systems that serve a great purpose for those particular set of practitioners. But how do we then start to use master data underneath here, data platforms to join up that data, so that we're making improving data quality and making best use of that data that we have. And then the last one that I wanted to touch on and go into a bit more details is the relatively new concept around data mesh and how we're looking to use that in a city region. The data mesh concept is relatively new. It's only about 3 years old now, but there's quite a lot of buzz around the industry about its potential to solve what has been a problem ever since data warehousing really came forward 20-25 years ago. So the traditional way of doing a data warehouse platform is to have each, these could be products, they could be services, parts of an organisation, doesn't really matter, is to push all of the data into whether it be a data warehouse or a data lake. And then you'd have a team that would then be transforming that data and serving it up back into the organisation through dashboards. The challenge with that is that the data warehouse team, particularly in larger organisations or in case cross-organisational, don't know the source data. So how do you move the capability back to the people that know the source data the best, whilst also adopting standards? And that's really the concept of the data mesh. There's 4 main principles behind it. So domain ownership, the people that produce the data own the data, and they deliver that data as a product back to the rest of the organisation that allows that other people in the organisation to self-serve that data and utilise it alongside other databases. But then also to have that overarching federated governance that makes sure that we're all talking the same language. So whilst data mesh as a concept is predominantly focused on single organisations, particularly very data-driven organisations, who are serving up vast amounts of data. So good examples of this are organisations like LinkedIn, who utilise the data mesh concept, where they've got a number of lots of different dev teams producing different amounts of data for consumption. So what you end up with there is each of the product teams that know the data the best are serving that up through their own pipelines into whether it be a warehouse, a lake house, or a data lake for consumption by the organisation. But they're doing that through standards that are agreed within the organisation. So they're all talking a common language, utilising master data where appropriate. So we've been looking at the concept for a couple of years now, and really wanted to find a use case that could prove this, and also at the same time increase the maturity levels within organisations that we work alongside. So the supported families, it used to be called the trouble families. It's been around for about 10 years now. The second generation revamped in about 2014, so it goes back to the Cameron era from a government perspective. Since it was established across Greater Manchester, there's over 50,000 families that have been supported through this programme. And what it's really looking at is multiple issues. So whether that be crime, school attendance, safeguarding, financial pressures, domestic abuse, or health conditions. And what it really does is encourages the use of data linking across different data sets, whether that be within an organisation, within the local authorities, which are a vast source of these data sets, or between organisations, the likes of GMP, and hopefully in the future as well, mental health data. At the moment, across Greater Manchester, most of it is done very manually through spreadsheets. All those spreadsheets across the 10 local authorities are actually sent into the combined authority, where we augment the data from GMP. There's a lot of reformatting needs to go on. It's very difficult to do identity checking and verification of talking about the same people. So, and it fundamentally actually crashes as a Microsoft Excel, the sheer amount of data that we're pumping through it. So we were looking at really how we can do this better across the city region, and utilising really the data mesh concepts to prove both joining up data better through a data platform capability, utilising the concepts of data mesh at city region level, but also improving outcomes and data quality for practitioners and analysts. So some of the things that we're looking to do through this, so a number of years ago, we created what we call the GM Digital Platform. And one of the key elements in there is having the capability to establish master data, not around just normal kind of data, but also around identifiable data, so that we know we can match different organisations, identities within an organisation, but also between organisations. The digital platform is entirely cloud-based. It was built as a greenfield project. And one of the other elements that we've developed is an identity access management capability that's federated across the city region for access for practitioners on a role-based access capability. For other projects, we're also tied into an NHS login for citizens access, but not so applicable to the supported families use case. So we've took the concept of a data mesh and really extended it into a distributed approach. So rather than having a single infrastructure, which is within the concept single data platform infrastructure, we're actually looking at a distributed with a node for each organisation, which allows us to maintain things like data sovereignty within an organisation. It makes it a lot easier from an IG perspective. And the aim is also to actually leave the data in situ within each of the nodes. The key differentiator from this will be that each of these nodes will be cloud-based, therefore we're operating within the cloud. Each one of these nodes is fundamentally just a data platform, and a cloud data platform. Doesn't matter if it's an Azure architecture, a Snowflake architecture, an AWS platform. Fundamentally, because we're just accessing data through tables and reading that, and then we can utilize different technology sets to actually create that mesh. So some of the key differentials that actually create the mesh is really looking around data catalog. So making sure that we're using the same language, and this is where we're going to tap into some of the national and international standards. So things like FHIR, which is the international health standard around coding JSON and XML files to specific language. So we're always talking about first name is always first name when you tag a field, no matter what the source column data actually says. Also things like SNOMED, and we're working with the department levelling up funded SAVVI program as well, which goes one step further and actually looks at standard data models around things like vulnerability. And how can we take these existing standards and extend them rather than generating new standards? And the key thing that makes this a distributed data mesh, though, is that we will have a hub in the middle that will push out that data catalog to all of the nodes. So when people are tagging nodes, they will utilize the same language across their nodes. So when we join the data together, it's all talking the same language. And then in the opposite direction, we flow the metadata back. So that's showing the data lineage across the different nodes available into the hub. So you've got a single point to go to understand what data is out there based on your role-based access. But the key thing is the data never leaves the node. So based on your role, you can self-service that data across each one of the nodes. create the data sets that you need for the particular work that you're doing, or in some instances actually look to develop data repositories with things like standards to set over the top that allows us to create a distributed, almost like a blockchain capability. But because it's generally read-only data, we're not using that distributed ledger capability. We're literally using it as almost as a proxy in between the different nodes of data. So eventually what that will look like is a number of different nodes ingesting, processing local data into common formats, using things like the digital platform to cleanse that data where it needs to against the master data, and our GM identity products place that security layer over the top, all the time while creating that global governance and open standards around the metadata and the data catalogs. The idea being that as the data is enriched and we ingest that data and match it alongside existing data, we start to improve the overall data quality in the city region. So how will this work in a supported families case? So each one of the local authorities that we're working with at the moment as part of this programme, which is funded by DLUC as part of one of their data accelerator programmes, will have a cloud-based analytics capability deployed into their tenancy. And this can be used for local data requirements. It's not just for the data mesh, it very much is there to increase the maturity and the use of data within organisations. We use tools, like I said, the master data and data quality capabilities that we have inside our digital platform to actually improve that data quality as close to source as possible. So the ultimate aim is actually to improve that data quality within systems. We'll bring in other data sets, so I've already mentioned the GMP data that will be used, and then we're also hopefully going to eventually bring in some mental health data, all which will be joined up through the combined authorities data node to provide that single distributed data set that will give us two specific outcomes. One, a data set that we can do analytics against to understand demand across the system, and the other one is a data-driven app with APIs that can tie into existing systems, or a low-code app that will develop on top where it can, where role-based access will allow practitioners to understand who those families are, who else is involved with supporting those families across the city region. So that's kind of what we're looking at doing with the data mesh as a city region. We have got another chat coming up later this week where we're actually looking at what we're doing with networks across the city region, very much around automation and delivering on a rather large full fibre rollout. But more importantly, what we can actually do with the tool set that we're putting in. So we've got colleagues from Cisco, ServiceNow partner, and Stockport Council that will be joining us on Thursday. And I'd just like to thank you for your time today. As I say, we've recorded this, so we'll make that available. And please reach out to us on our social chats. And thank you for today.